Hello, welcome to Sculpting at Home. My name's Amelia and I'm a sculptor. Some of you might already be familiar with me from my previous videos and my online courses. I'm a working sculptor. I started out in the film industry and then I specialised in sculpting portraits and figures for wax museums all around the world. I've sculpted hundreds of heads and I love sculpting, and I love the process of sculpting and sharing the process of sculpting. My aim with this series is to show you that you don't need loads of specialist equipment or a massive studio to work in. This is very much something that you can do from your own home. I would like to shine a light on the pure joy that comes from taking a lump of mud from the earth and modelling it into another human being's face. What could be more human than that? So who's this for? Well, I believe sculpting is pretty much for anyone that wants to try it. You know, if you're good at drawing, then you're probably going to be good at sculpting. If you like model making or making kits, puzzle solving, if you like any sort of crafting, then I would really suggest that you give this a go. Perhaps you're the sort of person that just likes really getting engrossed in a project and you're looking for your new thing to get into. Well, if you're the kind of person that does get a little bit obsessed with things, then prepare to love sculpting because it is extremely addictive. And the best thing is, it's not even bad for you. Perhaps you're a little bit of an introvert and you'd like to have a go at sculpting, but you feel a little bit intimidated by the thought of joining a whole class full of people with real models. And perhaps you'd just like to have a go on your own at home first, working from photos. Well, that is something that you can totally do, and I'm going to show you how to do that here. It's a very low stakes pursuit with huge rewards. And one of the most amazing things about studying in this way is that you find yourself actually learning to see things differently. And that is something that the world could really do with a little bit more of right now, quite frankly. My hope is that somebody out there will stumble across one of these videos and they've never thought of sculpting before, and they see this process of working with clay and they think, wow, maybe that's something I'd like to have a go at. Maybe that's actually my thing. Maybe they discover that sculpting is actually their thing. So I would like to say to you, ditch the watercolours, open a bag of clay and join me for this sculpt along. Now, as you can see, I've already sculpted Mark here so that you can see roughly what the end result will look like. And now I'm going to start again from the very beginning and demonstrate the whole process with you. And I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the other famous faces and other people that I've sculpted over the years. I thought it'd be really fun for this series to do a character sculpt. It's something I haven't done on video before, because normally I talk about trying to capture someone's actual real personality, but Mark here is an actor, so for this role I've asked him to play the role of an evil baddie for us. I mean, in real life Mark is actually a very nice man, sometimes a little bit silly, but for this role he is the angry, sinister character for you to sculpt. Now, I've chosen a slightly more mature man to sculpt because some of my favourite sculpts that I've done over the years have been older men. People like Robin Williams, Jackie Chan, Bill Murray, Jim Carrey, Pope Francis, and my absolute favourite person I've ever sculpted has to be Aussie soap legend Harold Bishop. Now, as a general rule of thumb, younger people do tend to be a little bit more tricky to sculpt than older people, especially girls, because they just have much more subtle bone structure and all the forms are very subtle and it's very difficult. There's nowhere to hide. It's a much more challenging sculpt. So I've chosen an older man because it is going to be a little bit easier for you. It's all those little details and idiosyncrasies that make someone unique and beautiful, and those things are so much more visible on an older face where they've grown into their personality and you can see all their characteristics and most used expressions etched into their faces. I'm really excited to share with you the process of sculpting Mark. I really enjoyed sculpting him the first time round. He's got such a characterful, brilliant face and he's really getting into character as well. This series is a sculpt along, so I am inviting you to join me in sculpting our brilliant model Mark here. So I will be sculpting him from photographs and measurements, and I have made a pack for you so that if you go over to our teaching website, sculptingmasterclass.com, then you can actually purchase the pack of the photos and measurements that I'll be working from so that you can sculpt along at home as well. The technique that I'll be using is the same technique, exactly the same technique that I teach in my video course, Strong Foundations, and my lower cost picture course, A Sculptor's Notebook. It's exactly the same technique. So if you've done those courses, then you'll be very familiar with the technique that I'm using. And if you want to get on and try a full course straight away, then you can purchase them on the website with all our other courses on anatomy and sculpting the figure. For this, I'm going to be sculpting Mark, and you can either sculpt along with me, or you can just watch the whole process and give it a go with your own model. The technique that I use involves building up the skull structure from the inside out. So you're literally building up the shape of the skull and then coming up towards the surface of the skin. Now, online, I've seen a lot of people learning to sculpt heads on kind of generic skull shapes, and I don't really think that's a very good idea because everybody's skull is a different shape. You know, we all have very different faces. If you look at these two examples, these are exactly the same scale, but look at the different shapes of their basic skull structure. If you look at Mark here, he's got a really narrow face. So he's got quite a long face that way and then very narrow that way. And then Katie here has got a wide face compared with the length of her face. So you can see that they're just totally different skull shapes within their faces. The thing is, if you're going to sculpt onto a generic skull shape, you're not really giving yourself the best chance to get a really good likeness. And it really does not take very long to build up your specific skull shape when you've got proper measurements and photos. Now, when you're thinking about how you're going to sculpt your character, you want to take into consideration both the facial expression but also the pose as well. So as I've said, I wanted Mark here to be this kind of sinister, angry guy. So I've got him pulling an angry, frowning expression, but I've added to the drama by tipping his head down as well. So he's looking up, which just adds to that angry feeling. In short, you want to think about the facial expression but also what their head is doing as well. Whoever it is that you're sculpting, it's a good idea to think about what sides of their personality it is that you want to portray in this particular sculpt. So I've been doing this a really long time, as I've said, and I've actually got to the point where I've sculpted some celebrities more than once. For instance, Whitney Houston. I sculpted her the first time as this kind of stoic, serious expression from the Bodyguard film. And then the second time I was asked to sculpt her was a completely different side of her personality. And it's kind of chirpy, smiley Whitney from I Want to Dance with Somebody. So you've got the same person, but different sides of their personality. And you, as the artist, have to make that decision about which side of their personality it is that you want to really focus on for this portrait. I've sculpted Mark at 75%, that's 3/4 life size, and that's the size that I've made all the measurements in the measurement pack that you can download on the Sculpting Masterclass website. I chose that size because it's actually one of my favourite sizes to work. It's big enough that you can really model all the forms and get in there and enjoy the process without it being too fiddly, but it's also small enough that you can work on it in a smaller environment or at home as you'll be sculpting. When I worked in the film industry, I sculpted heads of all different sizes, from little tiny heads like this little Liam Neeson that I sculpted when I was working on Batman Begins movie, right up to the giant Weasley head that I sculpted for the Weasley's Wizard Wheezes shop down in Diagon Alley. But of all the sizes I've sculpted, honestly, this is my favourite size. People are often really surprised at the different scales, so I thought I'd just line up some different head sizes from things that I had lying around just to show you some of the relative sizes. So this is a life-size head here. Then this is actually 3/4 scale, which is what we're going to be sculpting Mark. Then this is half size, a third, and then here he is again, Liam Neeson 1/6. So people often think that half is going to be much bigger than it is, but when you actually think that every measurement is half the size, that's why you end up being this small. You actually compare it. I mean, she's a child and he's obviously a big man, but it's still a huge difference between life size and half life size. So there's some different scales for you to consider. Start putting clay on, just wanted to have a quick word about armatures. Now, an armature is just a solid structure to sit within your clay. It just gives you something to build your clay onto. If you were to do it just solid clay, then it wouldn't have any strength and it's not attached to anything. So you need some sort of a baseboard with a pole and something to stick your clay onto. This particular one here is built in the same way that I show you how to make in Strong Foundations, my video course on portrait sculpting. This one is obviously a little bit smaller because it's 3/4 scale, but there are instructions on how to make this in a sculptor's notebook and Strong Foundations on Sculpting Masterclass website. Now for this, I'm going to be working on an armature like this, which is made out of sort of miniature scaffolding. It's called key clamp, and it just allows me to put it onto my adjustable stand so that I can lean the head back and tip it forward so that I can show you different things during the sculpting process. If you don't have things like armature wire and you're feeling like you don't have the right things, do improvise with whatever you can find, because all you really need is some sort of a baseboard, a vertical pole, and then something for your clay to stick onto. So you could make something like this, which is just a post attached to a baseboard with some brackets, and it's got some screws and some wire, and this just gives you something for the clay to hold on to. So without further ado, let's get some clay on and start sculpting. Oh, excuse me, that seems to be my question hotline already. Hello? Oh. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Fernando. That was just my secretary, Fernando, informing me of my very first question. And it's what everybody in the world seems to want to know, and it's what clay do I use? Let me tell you. This is the clay I use. It's the #1 question that everybody asks me. It's just a water-based sculpting clay. It's the same sort of clay you can get from most pottery suppliers. It's just a nice, smooth, pale modelling clay. So whereas you can get this shipped, it's very expensive to ship because it's very heavy if you're not in the UK. So I'd recommend, if you're not in the UK, just try and find your local pottery supplies and ask them what their smoothest modelling clay is, and it'll be totally fine. Now it really is up to you what clay you use. Some people like monster clay, some people like wed clay, some people prefer an oil-based clay like plastiline or Chavant. I personally like water-based clay. It's just what I've always used, and it's very cheap, and that's what I'm going to be using during this course. But it's not a very special type of clay that I use. The main thing that I'm going to be teaching in this course is how to understand what you're actually looking at and change the way that you see things. That's where the learning comes in, not what special stuff you've got, what equipment you've got, what clay you've got, what tools you've got. None of that matters. It's all about actually studying what you're seeing and understanding the anatomical structure underneath, and training your eye to see more accurately, not what you think is there, but what is actually right there in front of you. Now, in terms of equipment, I'm really trying to keep this simple, because my main thing with this series is I just want to encourage you to have a go at home. You don't need a special sculpting stand. This sculpting stand here is one that you can get on Amazon. I think in most countries it's very cheap. This one is a bit more expensive. It's a specialist one. It doesn't squeak. I am actually going to be sculpting on this one because this one will drive you mad if I sculpt it on that during this. So I am going to be sculpting on this one. But if you want something cheap to work on at home, one of these will not be too expensive for you. Right, before I start actually putting my clay onto my armature, I just want to think about where my armature is going to sit within the clay, especially from the side, because if you just look from the side, and my armature will be like that as well, look at how Mark's neck is leaning forward. Now, people's necks always lean forward pretty much, whatever position they're doing. Even if they've got their head leaning back a bit, it still leans forward a little bit. So if you imagine my neck leaning forward like this and my head being here, you've got to be careful that you don't hit armature at the pit of the neck. Now, If you look on Mark, you can see I have actually hit armature there, and of course I did that just so that I could illustrate this to you. It definitely wasn't a mistake or anything, but he does have a very deep pit of the neck, I warn you. So if you are going to sculpt Mark, then bear in mind that you do not want to hit the armature at the bottom, really. I mean, it doesn't matter too much, but it's just something to think about. It's a very simple pose. You don't have to think too much about bending the head either way. Obviously, if you're sculpting someone doing a more dramatic pose, then you need to think about that. No matter what pose you're doing, your neck does project forward to some degree or other. I mean, obviously, if you're doing one of my favourite waxwork poses, the wacky comedian leaning forward being hilarious, then your neck is very much leaning forward. But even when you're doing other poses, like some of my other waxwork favourite poses, the moody rapper or musician who's got his head leaning forward and is looking up, it's still leaning forward a little bit, your neck. Or the lost in music musician, listening to the music and just feeling the vibe. He's still, even though his head is tipped back, his neck is still leaning forward. Right, let's get some clay on this armature. Now, this is where you have to really squidge that clay in, because you want it to properly stick to those bits of wire. So that's what they're there for, to grip onto the clay. Make sure that you don't get any bits of head falling off, because if you press it on too lightly, then it doesn't really grip onto your armature. So just squidge it right in. You can use the heel of your hand to just squidge it right on like that. I'm just going to do that all over it. So I've covered the top of the armature, and then I'm just really squidging it on down the sides. So I've decided which side is going to be my front, because I've imagined where the head is going to be. So this is going to be my front, that's the back. So I'm imagining the profile on my head, and I'm just at this stage, I'm just getting a nice solid basic balloon upside down shape of clay where we're going to start building the head onto. So I'm always thinking about where that head's going to be on the armature, even from this really early stage. So I know that this is the back, this is the front. I know that my neck's going to be coming forwards a bit, and I know that my face is going to stick out more than the back of the head. Now, one other thing is, it's a good idea to just put, wherever you think the top is, you've put some on the top of the armature, but just whack a bit extra on there, because you don't, once you start carving into it and things, you can find that you end up with the armature sticking out the top. So just bear on the side of extra caution and just add extra on the top. And then I find it easiest to think about it from the side first. Just think, well, if that's where the top of the head is, then the back's curving around like that a bit, and then my face will be somewhere around here, and then I'm just smearing it on really. So I'm really just not thinking about any kind of detail or anything like that. I'm just getting a nice solid shape to go underneath where we're going to start actually building our likeness onto. This is where it's really good to have your baseboard clamped onto your stand, because when you're really pushing it in, if you don't have it securely attached, you can end up pushing it off the stand. That's about enough from the side now. I'm just vaguely thinking about where that back of the head is there. I'm imagining my face on here, and now I just want to sort of equal out the two sides and make sure it's nice and symmetrical, because his face is going to be, you know, it's not leaning from side to side, so we just want to make sure that we've got a nice symmetrical upside down egg balloon shape. So you're looking at the front. I'm just going to spin it around so I can see it. I'm packing it on nice and tight. This is why I like working with water-based clay, because it's just so tactile and lovely to work with compared to oil-based clay. You can't really smear on oil-based clay like this. It's much slower to build it up. But water-based clay is really quite quick in these early stages, because you can really put on a load and smear it around very quickly. Last thing that I want to do is to just draw a line down the centre of the face so that I know where that centre line is right from the beginning. So I'm just going to get a tool. Don't worry, I'm going to talk a lot more about tools later on, but this is just what I call a drawing tool. It's just good for drawing straight lines. So I'm just thinking about a straight line, and I'm just going to draw it on, and that is going to be where I build my profile onto in the next video. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this first episode of Sculpting at Home, and if you want to see how I go from this all the way through to a sculpt like this, then please remember to like and subscribe so you don't miss any of the subsequent videos. And if you can't wait to get sculpting, then just go over to sculptingmasterclass.com and see my vast array of courses that you can get straight away. And if you have any questions for me that you'd like me to answer in these videos, then just put them into the comments section and I'll try and answer a question every day. I'll get Fernando to phone them through to me on my special question hotline and answer them in one of the videos.